Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Chasing the Cup. I'm your host Will England, and in this episode I'm going to be doing a recap of the Bristol dirt races as well as a full review of the Martinsville weekend. I'll also go over the news and I'm going to preview this weekend's races at Talladega. But first, let's do our quick recap of Bristol dirt. Christopher Bell won the Cup race and Joey Logano won the truck race on Bristol dirt, and both races were solid, especially the Cup race, which was really great. There was guys going 3 and 4 wide all the time. There were dive bombs, slide jobs. It was just fun to watch in person. I'm not sure how much Fox showed during that weekend, but there was plenty of action going on at Bristol dirt, more so in the Cup series, but the truck series was also pretty good, but Joey Logano stunk up that show, but overall the weekend was excellent. Next up is the Martinsville review, starting off with the Cup series. Kyle Larson is able to pass Joey Logano with around 24 laps to go on 2 fresh tires to get his first win at Martinsville, and he's followed by Joey Logano, who was on older tires, in second. Martin Truex Jr. finishes third on fresh tires. Denny Hamlin finishes fourth. Chase Briscoe has a solid outing at fifth. Eric Almirola as well in sixth. Ryan Blaney finishes seventh. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. finishes eighth. Good run for him. Bubba Wallace finishes ninth. And Chase Elliott, in his return, rounds out the top 10. In my opinion, this race was okay. It wasn't as bad as last spring. I'd say it was around the same level as the fall race minus the wall ride. There was still some action going on, but in my opinion, Martinsville has become the new Richmond, thanks to this new car. Richmond before earlier this year, and after its peak in the 2000s, became more of a pit strategy based track. You can make up spots with pit strategy, but it was so hard to pass under green at Richmond, probably thanks to the aerodynamics of the Gen 6. But that all changed with the new next gen package this year. Phoenix didn't really see any improvement, but that's just Phoenix. But Martinsville, there was no improvement from last year, and the racing was better with the Gen 6. So right now, Martinsville, it seems to be the biggest dud of the Gen 7 era so far. Dirty air seemed to be more of an issue here at Martinsville than it was at Richmond, where the racing was actually pretty close, and there's actually more beating and banging going on at Richmond than Martinsville, which is surprising. So NASCAR really needs to fix the problem with this car at this track. They fixed Richmond, but they still need to do a lot of fixing to Martinsville. I'm not sure if it's the shifting. I'd say tire wear maybe, but Goodyear brought in a better tire, and hopefully they bring a better tire for Bristol too. But there seems to be something else with the aerodynamics with the car, as well as maybe some of the things under the hood that don't seem to be meshing well with this racetrack. So NASCAR needs to get to work on a fix, because this was one of the best tracks on the schedule, besides the super speedways and Bristol. But now it's become as boring as Richmond was, and Richmond actually became more exciting. So NASCAR, you gotta fix the problem with the Gen 7 at this racetrack, or else Martinsville's attendance is gonna drop off big time. Next up for the Xfinity race, John Hunter Nemechek gets his second win of the season, and he's followed by his teammate Sammy Smith in second. Cole Custer finishes third. Josh Berry finishes fourth. Brandon Jones finishes fifth. Justin Allgaier finishes sixth. Daniel Hemrick finishes seventh. Derek Kraus gets his best finish in the Xfinity series so far in eighth. Brett Moffitt finishes ninth, and Chandler Smith rounds out the top 10. And this race was way better than the Cup Series race. There was a lot more action going on. The racing was pretty close until the end when John Hunter Nemechek pulled away, but after he pulled away, there was still action going on for second when Sammy Smith moved Cole Custer out of the way to get second. And you also had some tempers flare, like with Sam Mayer and Ryan Truex getting to each other, and then Sam Mayer flipping the bird, as well as Joe Graff Jr. confronting Ryan Ellis after an incident on the track. So it isn't the track itself that's the problem, because the Xfinity race put on a great show, and probably the best race of the weekend. And I don't know why the Xfinity series stopped racing at Martinsville after 2006, but since it made its return in 2020, it's been a hit, in my opinion. And finally, for the truck race, Corey Heim gets his first win of the season and gets the newly rebranded Tricon Garage their first win. And he's followed by Kyle Busch in second, Zane Smith in the third, Ty Majeski in fourth, Tanner Gray in fifth, Ben Rhodes in sixth, Matt DiBenedetto in seventh, Taylor Gray in eighth, William Sawalich in his Truck Series debut finishes ninth, and Chase Purdy rounds out the top 10. In my opinion, this race was quite messy because of how NASCAR dealt with the rain. We had a rain delay before the race because of some heavy storms, but then after it cleared and NASCAR did some track drying, they decided to put on the wet weather tires and run for 20 laps to get the track drying finished. And then sometime in stage 2, there was another little shower, but instead of putting on another set of wet weather tires, NASCAR decides to fully dry the track up before restarting. And then another little pop-up shower hits after stage 2 during a caution that leads to NASCAR calling the race. In my opinion, NASCAR really needs to learn from this race on deciding when to use these tires, because they say you can't really use them in the pouring rain, but the way that they judged it made it more like a judgment call. They could have put on the tires when it was a little rainy, but it was not pouring the rain like it was at COTA, and in my opinion, NASCAR should have not called the race there. They should have put on those wet weather tires and went to the end, because why would you buy 3 sets of wet weather tires when you're only going to use one? It just makes no sense at all, especially since these tires are very expensive, and if you're not getting your money's worth out of them, it's not a worthy investment to bring these tires to the racetrack, especially since a lot of these teams don't have the same funding as the Cup guys. And before we continue to the news, we gotta talk about Carson Hocevar. 1 week after getting his first win, he decides to revert to his old self. He tried to right hook one guy in turn 2 one time, and then on the backstretch, he once again attempted to right hook another guy. That is just embarrassing. Why would you do that? That is just stupid. You ain't no rookie, Carson Hocevar. You are a veteran in the Truck Series. You've been doing this since 2021 full time. And you've been racing in this series since 2020 when you ran part-time. And you have not learned a thing when it comes to anger management, because you've spun out on purpose a couple of times, and also you've wrecked guys as well on the track. So Carson, get your act together. You're not going to last in this sport long if you're going to act like an immature moron on the racetrack. And so overall, I'd say this weekend at Martinsville was one to forget. Besides the Xfinity race, which was great, the Cup Series was okay, but not great. It was kind of like watching Richmond, while the truck race was just a mess. With all the rain and Carson Hocevar, it's just been one of those weekends. And so with that out of the way, let's get to the news. Starting off with the biggest news of last week, Cody Ware has been arrested twice. He was first arrested on April 10th in Iredell County, North Carolina, and he was charged for a felony assault by strangulation as well as a misdemeanor assault on a woman. He probably got out on bond, but then on April 14th, he turned himself back in for additional charges, which include a misdemeanor assault, inflicting serious injury, and communicating threats. His bond for additional charges is now placed at $5,000. And currently, Cody Ware has been indefinitely suspended from NASCAR competition. Matt Crafton subbed in for the Bristol Dirt Race before it was announced on that Monday, and Zane Smith ran Martinsville. And at this time, I do not know who will be driving the 51 at Talladega. Jimmy Johnson will be inducted into the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America's 2024 class. Raising Cane's will be sponsoring Ryan Ellis this weekend at Talladega. First Bank of Alabama will be sponsoring Sam Mayer at Talladega this weekend. Tommy Baldwin has joined Rick Ware Racing as competition director. Champion Container will be sponsoring Daniel Dye in 4 races this year. Black's Tire will be sponsoring AJ Allmendinger at Darlington. Aerovante will be partnering with Spire Motorsports and Corey LaJoie for the Coca-Cola 600. Corey Heim will make his Xfinity Series debut later this this month at Dover. Race Day Live with Kenny Wallace and John Roberts will be returning for 6 more races this year at SMI racetracks. After the Richmond race, there was more penalties on Hendrick Motorsports. Both the 24 and 48 teams were penalized for violating sections 14.1D, 14.1.2B, and 14.5.6. Point B, which deal with the greenhouse. Ryan Campage and Greg Ives were fined $75,000 and were suspended from 2 NASCAR Cup Series championship points events, which began after Bristol, because they were announced late, but in my opinion didn't really matter because the normal crew chiefs were back after the other penalties. The appeals panel has upheld Denny Hamlin's Phoenix penalty. Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Some Drop have once again teamed up for a multi-year partnership. Also with this announcement, Junior will also compete in the Cars Tour event at North Wilkesboro on May 17th. The appeals panel has upheld Colleague Racing's penalty from Phoenix. And finally, we have the Bristol Dirt TV ratings. Fox got 3.5 million viewers for the Bristol Dirt race, which is down about 500,000 viewers from last year, which got 4 million viewers. So actually, it's not that much of a decrease, which is good, but it was still a decrease. It was not as bad of a decrease, probably thanks to this race being a made-for-TV spectacle. And so that's it for this week's news. Now it's time to preview this weekend's races at Talladega. The Truck Series is going to be off for a couple of weeks, so we're going to start with the Xfinity race, which is the AC Pro 300. The race will be 113 laps and 300.58 miles, and the race will be on April 22nd at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And so for my pick, I gotta go with the obvious answer. I'm going with Austin Hill. He's been a force to reckon with on these super speedways since the fall of Colleague Racing, and he's been fast so far this year, and I think he'll win this weekend at Talladega. And finally, for the Cup race, we have the Geico 500. The race will be 188 laps and 500 miles, and the race will be on April 23rd at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And so for my pick, I'm going to go with Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch was very fast during the Daytona 500, and he was so close to winning the Daytona 500. But I think this time Kyle Busch will be fast at Talladega like he was at Daytona, and I think he'll win at Talladega. And so that's it for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe for more. And if you're going out to Talladega this weekend, I hope you have a good time. If you're not, have a good time wherever you are, and I'll see you next week.